The accidental chosen. The alarm screaming through the cockpit of the Betty May told Marcus Chen everything he needed to know. Today was going to be one of those days. Come on, baby, just a little further, Marcus muttered, wrestling with controls that had stopped responding 3 minutes ago. The cargo hauler shuddered violently as it pierced the atmosphere of whatever planet his failing nav system had dragged him toward. Through the viewport, purple skies and silver forests rushed up to meet him at a speed that would have terrified anyone with better sense. Marcus had been hauling freight through the outer sectors for 6 years. He delivered everything from medical supplies to mining equipment across 70 different worlds. And in all that time, he'd learned one crucial lesson. When things went wrong in space, you either kept your head or you died screaming. He chose the former. The Betty May hit the ground like a meteorite with trust issues, carving a trench through crystalline soil before finally grinding to a halt against something solid. Marcus's harness caught him hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. For a moment, he just sat there, listening to the hull groan and settle, waiting to see if anything was going to explode. When nothing did, he laughed, a shaky, slightly hysterical sound. Well, we're down. That's something. Emergency protocols dictated he should stay with the ship and activate his distress beacon. Marcus pulled up the damage report and watched that plan die instantly. Main power, critical failure. Backup power depleted. Communications array, somewhere in the half-mile trench behind him. Right. Plan B. Find help. He grabbed his emergency pack, cycled the manual airlock release, and stepped out onto an alien world for the 71st time in his career. What he saw stopped him cold. The Betty May had crashed at the edge of a massive plaza, its white stone surface unmarked despite millennia of existence, and rising from the center of that plaza, dominating the landscape like a mountain of gold and silver, stood the most magnificent structure Marcus had ever seen. The temple, because it could only be a temple, spiraled upward in impossible geometry, its walls covered in script that seemed to shift and shimmer in the purple sunlight. At its base, 2 enormous gates stood sealed, their surface mirror-smooth except for designs that might have been constellations or prophecies or both. But more striking than the temple itself were the beings surrounding it. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. They filled the plaza in organized groups, some kneeling in prayer, others studying tablets and holographic displays, still others standing in ceremonial armor as if guarding something sacred, and every single one of them had stopped what they were doing to stare at him. Marcus had seen dozens of alien species in his travels, but the variety here was staggering. Beings of crystal and shadow, entities that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, creatures armored in biological plates that looked like they could shrug off artillery. And all of them were staring at the human who'd just fallen from the sky. Marcus said eloquently. Hi, I don't suppose anyone speaks standard trade? The nearest group, tall beings with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned like distant stars, recoiled as if he'd blasphemed. One of them, wearing robes that probably cost more than Marcus's ship, stepped forward with an expression that transcended species barriers. Pure horror. You dare? The words came through Marcus's universal translator, though the contempt needed no translation. This is the Temple of Ascension, sacred ground where only the worthy may tread. You accident have defiled— Look, I'm really sorry, Marcus interrupted, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. I didn't mean to crash here. My ship had a malfunction, and I just need to contact someone for a rescue. Is there a comm station or— Silence! Another alien pushed forward. This one, serpentine, easily 20 feet long, with scales that reflected the plaza like liquid mercury. Do you know where you stand? This is Kethavara Prime, heart of the covenant of ancient wisdom. For 10,000 cycles, beings of legend have come to these gates seeking entry to the Temple of Ascension. That's impressive, Marcus ventured. For 10,000 cycles, the gates have remained closed. The serpent continued. Kings of the Stellar Dominion, rejected! The warlord Kreshtak, who conquered 17 sectors, rejected. The prophet of the eternal flame, who foresaw the heat death of stars, rejected. Even the harmonized collective, 20,000 minds joined as one perfect being, rejected. A smaller creature, all angles and crystalline geometry, chimed in with what Marcus's translator rendered as fervent agreement. The prophecy states that only when a being of true legend approaches will the gates recognize greatness and open. Only one whose deeds echo across galaxies, whose name is written in the fabric of reality itself, may enter the temple and receive the wisdom of the ancients. Okay, so, sacred temple, very exclusive, got it. Marcus glanced back at his smoking ship. Again, really sorry about the crash. I'll just get out of your hair, scales. Do any of you know where I could find? You will leave, immediately. The obsidian priest's voice crackled with barely contained rage. Your presence here is an insult to 10,000 years of sacred vigil. Guards, remove this. This human from holy ground before. Marcus wasn't really listening anymore. The adrenaline from the crash was wearing off, replaced by the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been flying for 36 straight hours before his ship decided to attempt suicide. His head hurt. His ribs hurt. And he was getting really tired of being yelled at by beings who looked like they could tear him apart. He needed to sit down. Just for a minute. The temple gates were right there, massive and probably cool in the shade they provided. Without really thinking about it, Marcus stumbled toward them, past aliens who parted in shock at his audacity. He barely registered their gasps and shouts. All he wanted was to lean against something solid for just a moment, catch his breath, and figure out his next move. His palm touched the gate's surface. The world exploded in light. It wasn't metaphorical. The gates literally erupted in brilliance that turned the purple sky white. The ground beneath Marcus's feet trembled, then shook, then sang, a note that resonated in his bones and teeth and the core of his being. The script covering the temple blazed to life, each symbol igniting in sequence like a city coming awake after centuries of darkness. The gates, sealed for 10,000 years, unopened for countless legends, immovable by prophecy and power and prayer, began to part. The sound they made wasn't mechanical. It was organic, triumphant, like the first breath after nearly drowning. And Marcus, still half leaning against them because his ribs really did hurt, stumbled forward into the opening as every alarm in his pilot's instinct screamed at him to run. Behind him, the plaza erupted in chaos. Impossible! The gates! The gates have opened! But he's just a cargo hauler! A human, this cannot be. The prophecy. Marcus spun around, suddenly very aware of the massive architectural mistake he'd just made. Wait, I didn't mean to. This was an accident. I just wanted to. The gates, with the finality of a judge's gavel, slammed shut behind him. The light from outside cut off instantly, leaving Marcus in darkness broken only by the soft glow of the script on the walls, script that now seemed to be leading him deeper into the temple. From beyond the sealed gates, he could hear shouting, arguments, what sounded like someone starting a prayer and someone else starting a fight. Marcus looked at his emergency pack. He looked at the dimly glowing corridor ahead. He looked at the gates that had sealed with a solid thunk that suggested they wouldn't be opening again anytime soon. Well, he said to the empty temple, his voice echoing down passages that hadn't heard sound in 100 centuries. Guess I'm going this way. The temple, if it had opinions on this matter, kept them to itself. Marcus shouldered his pack, checked that his flashlight still worked, and started walking into the unknown. Because really, what else was a human supposed to do? The trial of the unworthy. The corridor seemed to breathe. Marcus had been walking for maybe 20 minutes, though time felt strange here. Elastic and uncertain. And he'd noticed the walls pulsing with that soft bioluminescent glow, contracting and expanding like the temple was alive. The script continued to flow across every surface, always just ahead of him, leading him deeper. His pilot instincts screamed that this was a terrible idea. But then again, those same instincts had told him to lean against an ancient alien temple gate. So maybe it was time to stop trusting them. The corridor opened into a chamber so vast that Marcus's flashlight couldn't find the ceiling. The walls here were different, smooth as glass and reflective, showing Marcus his own image repeated infinitely in every direction. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and floating above it, a sphere of soft golden light. Okay, Marcus said, his voice swallowing into the immensity of the space. This is either the treasure room or where I die horribly. 50-50 odds. Neither, a voice responded, and Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonant and ancient, speaking directly into his mind rather than his ears. You stand in the chamber of reflection, first trial of the Temple of Ascension. Right, great. Look, I'm really sorry about earlier. The gate thing was an accident. I didn't mean to break your 10,000-year streak or whatever. If you could just point me to an exit. There is no exit, the voice said simply. Not until you complete the trials or fail them. These are the terms that have existed since the temple's creation. Marcus felt his stomach drop. And if I fail? No one has ever entered to fail. This is the first trial in 10 millennia. Super. No pressure. Marcus approached the pedestal slowly, eyeing the sphere of light like it might explode. So what do I have to do? Fight something? Solve a riddle? Lift a really heavy rock? You must confront the truth, the voice said. Look into the reflection and see yourself as you truly are. Accept what you see, or be consumed by denial. The sphere pulsed and suddenly the infinite reflections in the walls changed. They no longer showed Marcus as he was now, but as he'd been throughout his life. 1,000 versions of himself, none of them particularly impressive. Marcus Chen at 17, failing the entrance exam to the Colonial Fleet Academy. Marcus at 20, working as a dock loader because it was the only job he could get. Marcus at 23, buying a used cargo hauler with a 15-year loan because it was all he could afford. Marcus yesterday making his 5,000th routine delivery run, still alone, still unremarkable, still just ordinary. This is the truth of you, the voice intoned. You are no legend, no warrior, no prophet or king. You have conquered no worlds, saved no civilizations, achieved no greatness. You are, by every measure that matters to the galaxy, utterly insignificant. The words should have hurt. Maybe they would have a few years ago. But Marcus had spent 6 years flying solo through the void, plenty of time to make peace with who he was. Yeah, he said, studying his reflections without flinching. That's about right, the voice paused as if surprised. You accept this? Why wouldn't I? I'm a cargo pilot. I haul freight. It's not glamorous, but someone's got to do it. Marcus shrugged. Those medical supplies I delivered to Outpost 7 last month? They needed those to treat a plague outbreak. I'm not a hero for delivering them, but if I hadn't shown up on time, a lot of people would have died. That colony on Frost's Edge, I bring them their supplies every 6 weeks like clockwork. I'm not changing the galaxy, but I'm part of what keeps it running. You claim this is enough? To be ordinary? Ordinary? Marcus laughed. Look, I've met a lot of extraordinary beings in my travels. Half of them were so busy being legends that they forgot to be useful. I knew this Valorian warrior once. You know those 7-foot-tall honor-bound fighter types? He spent 3 hours telling me about his glorious conquests. Know what he didn't do? Help me load the medical equipment I was delivering to his own people, 2 beneath him. The reflections flickered, shifting. I've seen ordinary dock workers save ships from depressurization, Marcus continued, warming to his theme now. I've watched ordinary engineers solve problems that their genius designers couldn't. Hell, humanity's whole thing is being ordinary. We're not the strongest or the smartest or the longest lived. We're just stubborn. We show up. We do the work. We don't quit. This is your truth? The voice asked. That ordinariness is strength? No, Marcus said firmly. My truth is that ordinary and insignificant aren't the same thing. Every delivery I make matters to someone. Every time I show up on schedule, someone's life gets a little easier. I might not be a legend, but I'm reliable. And in my experience, the galaxy needs reliable a lot more than it needs legendary. The sphere of light flared brilliantly, and all the reflections shattered like glass, not violently, but like they were transforming into something new. When Marcus could see again, the walls showed something different. His deliveries, yes, but also their consequences. The child who survived because medicine arrived in time. The colony that made it through winter because supplies came before the freeze. The research station that made a breakthrough because their equipment was delivered intact. Tiny ripples, spreading outward. Nothing legendary. Everything significant. You have passed the first trial, the voice said, and Marcus could swear it sounded impressed. You see yourself clearly and find no shame in truth. The legendary beings who came before you could not do this. They saw their imperfections and denied them, or saw their greatness and were consumed by it. You alone accepted both without flinching. A doorway Marcus hadn't noticed before irised open in the far wall, revealing another corridor. Great, Marcus said, already dreading what came next. How many trials are there? For you? 1 more. That seemed too easy, but Marcus wasn't going to argue. He stepped through the doorway into a corridor that sloped downward, the bioluminescent script growing brighter with each step. The air here felt different, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. The corridor opened into a chamber even more vast than the first. But where the chamber of reflection had been empty, this one was full. Of what? Marcus couldn't immediately tell. The space was filled with geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Surfaces that existed in more dimensions than his brain could process, and at the center, something that might have been a door, or might have been a window, or might have been both. The test of persistence, the voice announced. Before you lies the labyrinth of infinite paths. To reach the center, you must navigate 1 trillion possible routes, each more complex than the last. The legendary beings who came before were granted visions of the solution. They failed because the complexity overwhelmed even their vast intellects. Marcus stared at the impossible geometry. You want me to solve that? I want you to try. But you just said it overwhelmed beings way smarter than me. How am I supposed to? Precisely, the voice said. How are you supposed to succeed where legends failed? And that's when Marcus understood. This wasn't a test of intelligence or strength or destiny. It was a test of character. The legendary beings failed because they believed they should be able to solve it, and when they couldn't, they gave up. But humans were used to being outmatched. Okay, Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves. I probably can't solve this, but I can try. And if I fail, I'll try again. And I'll keep trying until either I figure it out or I physically can't anymore. He approached the labyrinth, studying it from every angle his three-dimensional brain could manage. It was impossible, yes. Overwhelming, absolutely. But impossible just meant no one had done it yet. Marcus took his first step into the labyrinth. He was wrong immediately. The path folded in on itself, depositing him back at the start. He tried again, wrong again, and again, and again. An hour passed. Maybe 2. Marcus lost count of his attempts somewhere around 300. Each failure taught him something small. Each mistake eliminated one possible path among trillions. His legs ached. His head pounded from trying to perceive impossible angles, but he didn't stop. You cannot succeed, the voice observed, though it didn't sound mocking, just curious. The mathematics alone would take a mortal lifetime to calculate. Probably, Marcus agreed, trying another path. Wrong again. But here's the thing about humans, we're really, really bad at knowing when to quit. It's kind of our whole deal. He kept going, failing, trying, failing again. Somewhere around attempt 700, something strange happened. The labyrinth shifted, just slightly, as if acknowledging his persistence. Marcus noticed. He adjusted his approach, not trying to solve the entire puzzle but focusing on the next step. Just one step, then another. Not thinking about the trillion paths, just the one in front of him, step by step, failure by failure, human stubbornness in its purest form. And then, impossibly, Marcus was standing at the center. The geometric chaos resolved into something almost comprehensible. The door window thing opened, revealing not another chamber but a view of everything. The galaxy spread out before him, vast and beautiful and indifferent. You have passed, the voice said, and now it definitely sounded impressed. Not through intellect or power, but through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. Do you understand now why the gates opened for you? Marcus, breathing hard and probably concussed from perception strain, laughed weakly. Because I'm too stubborn to know when I'm beaten? Because true greatness is not inherent, it is chosen, the voice said. Every being who came to these gates believed they deserved entry because of what they already were. You touched them simply trying to rest, asking nothing, expecting nothing, believing yourself worthy of nothing, and that humility, that honest assessment of self without shame or pride, is what the gates have waited 10,000 years to find. The trials were never meant to crown legends, the voice continued. They were meant to create them, by testing not strength but character, not power but persistence. The galaxy is full of beings born to greatness. What it needs, what it has always needed, is beings who choose greatness. One stubborn step at a time. The view of the galaxy shimmered, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not a physical change, but an understanding. The temple hadn't given him power or knowledge or prophecy. It had given him something more valuable. Absolute clarity of purpose. The gates will open, the voice said. Go. Show the galaxy what they have forgotten. That greatness is not destiny but choice. That legends are not born but made. And that sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can be is extraordinarily determined. The chamber dissolved, and Marcus found himself standing before the gates again, from the inside this time. They opened silently, revealing the plaza beyond, still full of aliens who'd apparently been arguing the entire time he'd been inside. The moment they saw him, silence fell like a hammer. Marcus stepped out into the purple sunlight, limping slightly, covered in dust, looking exactly like what he was, an exhausted cargo pilot who'd had a really long day. The obsidian priest found his voice first. You emerged. The temple accepted you, but you're just human, Marcus finished. Yeah. Funny thing about humans. We don't know when we're supposed to lose. It's a problem, really. Very inconvenient, he surveyed the crowd. All these legendary beings and powerful entities who'd been rejected by gates that opened for a cargo hauler having a bad day. Your temple doesn't care about power or destiny, Marcus said. It cares about people who show up and do the work even when it's impossible. Especially when it's impossible. Because that's when it matters most. He shouldered his pack and started walking toward his crashed ship. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a distress beacon to fix. Deliveries don't make themselves. Behind him, the plaza remained silent as the beings who worshipped legends watched a human prove that sometimes the most legendary thing you can do is refuse to quit. The gates of the Temple of Ascension sealed behind him with quiet finality, their purpose fulfilled after 10,000 years. They had not found a legend. They had found something better. A human who understood that greatness isn't about being extraordinary. It's about being ordinary in extraordinary ways. And across the galaxy, as word of this day spread, the temple's final lesson would echo through civilizations. True legends are not those who are chosen by destiny. They are those who choose to keep going when destiny says stop.